So I've started to enjoy nature a lot more. And it's ever since I moved out here to BC. Originally, I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, and I wasn't exactly so much of an outdoor person. I did like um, going to bike around my neighborhood and eventually started biking, all along the paths across the city. But generally, I was kind of an indoor person. I always stayed at home. I don't know, like hiding out in my room, in the basement, playing video games, or watching movies. That was always kind of my thing. I think a lot of people can relate to that. But ever since coming here, I really like being outside, especially in places like this. It's kind of amazed how much variety of life, um, just like plants and animals, and birds, and flowers and fruits and stuff that are growing everywhere that I've literally never seen in my entire life. Uh, Even now, after being here for a few years, I still find new things and new places to explore. And it's always nice, like coming out here, like this looks like a well, it is a forest. Um, it looks like I'm totally outside the city, but I'm actually just a few blocks away from where I live. And then you kind of find something like this. It's kind of amazing. I think people take it for granted here, or they don't really explore it, or they don't really appreciate it, or something. Um, yeah, I really like the outdoor spaces. Somehow it calms me down. I think there's studies and stuff that say that people are generally calmer out in nature because of the greenery, because of, I don't know, being out in natural spaces. There's been some that says it's because of this sort of grand sense of scale or wonder. Um, but I kind of think it's a couple of things. I guess for me, one of them is just being out in an open space, especially here in Vancouver, where everything is, if you know anything about the housing market here, renting is kind of awful. The way the housing has been kind of forces a lot of people into small, tiny places. Like I live in a little basement suite underneath a house, a nice family. But yeah, I'm in a basement is part of a house. There's not a lot of apartment buildings around, at least not in like the main Vancouver area. So it feels very confined. I guess it's not as bad as maybe Toronto or New York or something, or Tokyo, where in Japan, where they have these tiny little coffins. Um, but it does feel confining when you're indoors here. But as soon as you're outside, you're not really restricted anymore. You've got so much space to explore. Um, like this park, Central Park here, it's so big. Um, it would take you like an hour or two to walk around the whole thing. Kind of ridiculous. Like I've seen parks before, but we're just like like a field and like a playground and a baseball diamond or something like that. But this is something else. Um, I also feel like people generally want something that is natural, if that makes any sense. Um, it's like the trees and the animals and the plants here, they all follow like the realities of the physical world. They have to absorb light. They have to absorb the water and the nutrients from the soil. They are affected by the temperature and the humidity and this and that and the animals that live off of it. And there's a natural order to things. I think that's the other thing that makes people feel calm is that our brains are tuned in some sense through evolution to be in like calm, not necessarily calm, I guess, but in nature is generally fairly quiet and fairly calm. Um, I think people think of the whole, I don't know, like Planet Earth and National Geographic where things are constantly attacking each other, but for the most part, I don't know, animals forage or whatnot, but they're just kind of chill. They're just existing. They find some food, they go to sleep, they kind of go to the next day. Plants just do their plant thing, and they grow wherever they can, wherever they can spread to. And there's something understandable about all of that. And then when you kind of throw ourselves, a few blocks away back into the city, suddenly you have all this traffic and anger, and you're not allowed to go into certain buildings. Cars take up most of the space. There's these little awful sidewalks that you're confined to, and suddenly you're part of this system, I guess, and this order of things where you have to like restrict yourself. You can't do these things. You're gonna break the laws if you do these things. You're not allowed to just go onto people's properties. People are upset about owning this space and that space because there's no space for everybody. There is no space, and that's sort of the part of the human cycle, I guess, we're living through because there's just so many people, um, and we don't know how to support everybody. The way things came to be, I don't think really support that. Especially here in Vancouver, you see that. I've talked to people who lived here for what, like 20 years or 30 years or their whole life, and they grew up here. And they're like, I've never seen this many people here. Their traffic used to not be this bad. Um, it's not so crowded, and things are somewhat like affordable. And the places you go to now that are actually considered separate cities, like Richmond or New West and Surrey, and even up in Squamish, like near in the mountains, um, they used to be like empty. They were places you went for like a day trip to go visit somewhere. Richmond used to be all farmland. Squamish is sort of like a destination you go to when you wanted to head out to the mountains. Um, but now it's like people live there and there's new developments there. I have a friend that lives up there and there's new condos and things are constantly changing. But there was never this much congestion and sort of this whole affordability crisis because it was just like a manageable number of people. So I think what I'm trying to say is like we feel all of this pressure from society because we're at a turning point where we don't know how to support everybody. And yeah, everyone feels confined and restricted in what they are allowed to do, what they're allowed to say, what they can afford, where they can go. So I'm grateful that places like this exist and the sun is actually out. Considering here it's rainy and cloudy for 80 to 90% of winter. This is kind of like a lucky break. Um, but it's nice being away from all of that noise and all of that pressure because it just like sometimes it just doesn't make any sense. um, how things are distributed and how some people have so much and other people are like, here there's a pretty big homeless population where they're just living off on the streets and you see them in all kinds of places around downtown. And that pressure is just tiring. It is very exhausting trying to keep up. And it just seems like it's kind of against the natural order of things. Like we we are animals. We like to pretend that we're not, but we have the same organs and the same hormones and the same blood and bodily functions as, I don't know, like the squirrels that live in this forest or the birds. Um, we function based off of just these natural rules where we need to feed ourselves. We feel a sense of pressure when we need to, survive, when we need to find food and water and some place to live and um, maybe to like, yeah, run away from dangerous things once in a while. But for the most part, it's like that's it. Like that's your existence. And in the modern world, we kind of like throw on that you have to work these jobs, you have to identify who you are, talk about pronouns and roles, and you can be this, and you can, what are men like, what are women like, like how we're supposed to be at a certain age, what we're supposed to own. Like it's a lot of supposed to. Like you're supposed to do this and you're supposed to do that. And everything stacks on top of one another. On top of your work, you have like, oh, but you're single. Oh, but you're not a good partner. Oh, you're not a, you have to be a parent. Oh, you have to, still be a good friend and a participating member of society. And we stack all of these pressures on top of one another. Um, and sometimes we even like succumb ourselves to these pressures. It's like when, I don't know, like when you follow something, like say it's something you're into, like sports or fashion, or I like movies a lot. You kind of feel this pressure to like keep up, um, to like stay up to date and to know what you're talking about and to be knowledgeable because if you comment or don't comment or like you don't want to be the like for movies like people don't want to say they watch the bad movies or that they enjoy they call it guilty pleasures because it's like not an high class artistic I don't know like masterpiece so even with things that we're supposed to do for fun we still put pressures on ourselves. I know that I played games for a while and I do know for sure like people online they put a whole shit ton of pressure on themselves to like suddenly be a good player like suddenly you have to be pro or if you're losing or if you're not part of the team someone will like ream you out um, and you make yourself feel bad and other people make you feel bad and it's supposed to be a game it's supposed to be for fun even like the fun things we do outside of all the things we need to do to survive or jobs that a lot of us don't want or they don't feel fulfilling um, or to like deal with the housing and the inflation and all that jazz even when we like do something for fun we still have a pressure we still put pressure on ourselves and I don't think any of that is like actually natural I think it's a result of how like people have tried to put boundaries on one another. And it's just kind of awful. I do think that there's like a change coming. I tend to be optimistic. Like I think that um, nerd out a little bit here is like the population is declining, kind of around the world. There are like emerging countries where the population is still growing, but basically all countries that have been developing have sort of peaked in terms of the number of people that they have, and it's just going to go down. So this whole like drive of endless growth and stuff and this constant selling to each other, I think it's going to go away, or at least it's going to die down. Um, but what'll come after that, who knows? But I think it'll alleviate a lot of that pressure. But at the same time, I think there's this sort of thing going on where, like, we want something real again, something natural. Like, there is a way things work when, like, people, humans, I guess, try not to control it so hard. Um, and I think intuitively we understand those things. So I guess that's just where my mind is going as I'm out here. That like it's good to be out in an open natural space because it actually makes sense. Um, you feel this kind of freedom. You feel like the way things grow, just in that sort of like messy chaos, but it's like living, like makes sense. But the kind of chaos that like people live in our societies doesn't quite make sense anymore. But I hope one day, when all of the madness kind of dies down, that we kind of come back to our senses and realize that hey, like maybe we should start kind of going back to our roots, simplifying things, and yeah, I guess that's my hope for today. And for now, I'll just enjoy what we have out here in these spaces whenever I can.